They told me for years there was no money in podcasting. Well, they were all wrong.
Where do you lie politically on this stand? Because, you know, we've gone back and forth on Facebook over the years, but I've always seen your shit. I'm gonna say, okay, sometimes Jefe is pretty left-leaning, sometimes he's pretty right-leaning. I know you're relatively religious and you're big on God and all that, but where do you think you land on politically? Because that thesis, just knowing you as I did, is a little surprising to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always been big on language, so I think that kind of the topic and the title I wrote about, you know, because I would say I'm mostly conservative leaning, but I like to start off in the center on things, as opposed to just being opposed to your idea because you're on that side of it. And as long as we can have a conversation, like, sure, I'll disagree with you, but if we can have a conversation about it, you're entitled to that opinion just as much as I'm entitled to mine. So, but yeah, so conservative leaning for the most part. I wanted to write about, when I was writing, that was really when Black Lives Matter was blowing up with everything. And so I wanted to write about something topical. And I studied a lot of W.E.B. Du Bois and kind of tried to figure out, okay, this is one of the most influential African-American philosophers, really, in the United States. And what would be kind of his perspective about where things are with racism in America. And in that research, it seemed to me that it seemed that hate is not really a natural human emotion. It's natural, but it's more secondary. And I think when you're looking at like politics, economics, everything, what I think a lot about, like Karl Marx, I think he was brilliant, but I think he had one focus. And so he was looking at economics and that was it, right? So there's a lot of other factors that get left out in that. So as I was studying this racism stuff, it seemed to me that we have capitalism for the most part and capitalistic structures. And because we've had those for so long, what people do is, okay, we have our economic system, which is a way it helps us survive, right? So what can I do to survive, which is kind of the essence of Darwin, survival of the fittest. And so you're building a capitalistic system. Okay, what is a way that we can get a leg up on other people? And I think at some point people are just like, oh, hey, these people have different colored skin than us. We can use that to our economic advantage. And so I don't think a lot of the racism in America's history is really rooted in anything hate-based. It was more of a, hey, we have a economic system and we can use this to accelerate it, to get ahead, to survive, to stay above and be economically successful. So that's kind of where I ended up with that. And it sounds, I guess, maybe like a shot at capitalism, but I don't think it's so subconscious that it's not like, hey, we're doing this because it's more of like, we have the system and it just naturally kind of came out of that.
That's interesting. So basically, you think racism today is more economically subconscious than it is willfully hateful?
I think it,
or is that historically as well?
I think it kind of really took root that way, right? Because I mean, you can still debate people today about, what was the Civil War really about? Like, was it economics? Was it about states' rights? Was it about slavery?
It's about all the above.
People have all right, and people have all sorts of ideas, but I mean the primary thing, and so, but specifically for the South back then, they had an economic system that was almost entirely based on slavery.
Exactly.
So if they could have had, Polish people work in the fields picking cotton, I'm sure they would have taken it.
Yeah.
That just wasn't the way the economic system was set up at the time, right?
It's interesting how the Civil War specifically, because like one of my best friends is from Nashville, and I know a lot of people from Nashville, like meeting his brothers and his friends and their friends.
Mm-hmm.
So like this comes up like not a lot, but it comes up. The Civil War and how they were taught the Civil War versus how like us in the North were taught the Civil War is very different. Now, don't get me wrong; they know the North won. Thank God. But, like, was the Civil War about slavery? It's like, well, yes and no. It was about states' rights. But that one of those rights was from slavery. And to your point, yeah, a lot of that was from economics. Like, their economy was built off slavery that they took out loans from the bank in New York, by the way. Right? So, and also, Robert E. Lee was just like, I don't give a shit about slavery. I just care about the South, right? I don't care. I'm misquoting him, but that's essentially what he said. And he's like, I don't like slavery. Right. It's like, that's how the economy works. So you couldn't just. Go ahead.
Which is a poor excuse.
Of course.
But it shows you how attached people are to their economic way of life, right? Which is why we get presidents elected. People think they can do for the economy. Yeah. Like that is a huge part of people's lives. And, the North is going through the Industrial Revolution or about to, and they need slaves. Their economy works well without them. And then you have half the states in the Union that are, economically feasible because of slavery. And like I said, I don't think it was, they have to be Black people or they have to be from Africa. Like that was the way the ship sailed. That was the way the system had been set up, from Britain, France, all those countries. Like it was more like I said, if they had other options, I think they would have taken him, throw some Polish people out in the fields. Like I really don't think it was rooted in, we hate these people because of the color of their skin. I think it was, we have an economic system and we're not going to mess with it.
That's interesting. It's an interesting premise.
And when you're in a capitalistic society, you'll find those ways to sustain it, right? Yeah. Like, even something as stupid as minimum wage, like that's a way to either keep people down or elevate people, right? So like whatever capitalism can get a hold of and run with as far as being a successful system, it's going to use.
Well, so how do you explain the Klan then? Because post-Civil War, Reconstruction, that was what saw the rise of the Klan. And they are solely based on hate. You think the Klan really gives a shit about capitalism? How is a fact like that? Because I don't want to discount the fact that hatred is a fundamental part of racism. Like I see what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing with you, but you can't discount hatred with racism.
Right. But I think it seems the last few years we've been told like, oh, we just have a country full of people who hate each other, as opposed to, we had a system that thankfully we were able to dismantle. And there are still the lingerings of people who do have that hate. But because, the Klan, so I'm not an expert on it, but I would imagine that a lot of those people were once very wealthy white people in the South whose economic way of living got completely destroyed. So you're bitter about that. And at some point when you are using something like race to sustain your economy, inevitably people are going to latch on to things like hate. If you're raised from a little child being told that person isn't as valuable as you are, it does seep in, but yeah.
And you can easily say, like, the hatred can come from economic hardship.